Este é o Azul.
Viva! Bem-vindos a mais um episódio do podcast do Azul, o projeto do público sobre ambiente, crise climática e sustentabilidade. Eu sou a Teresa Firmino, uma das editoras do Azul. Na semana da Conferência das Nações Unidas, que está a decorrer em Lisboa, um dos grandes temas é a negociação de um novo tratado para o alto-mar. O objetivo deste acordo é proteger o oceano para lá da jurisdição dos países. Por isso entrevistei a jurista Kristina Gjerde, conselheira política para o alto-mar da União Internacional para a Conservação da Natureza. A nossa entrevista foi conduzida em inglês. Hello, Kristina. Thank you so much for joining our podcast. The United Nations are discussing a new treaty for the high seas. Why is this treaty so important?
Well, the new treaty for the high seas is about marine life, marine biodiversity, the conservation and sustainable use. Right now, we have a legal system that has no way to create marine protected areas to conduct environmental impact assessments. So this treaty will give us processes and standards for how we conduct activities in the vast ocean that is beyond our national boundaries. Why it's so important is that the ocean is being threatened by climate, it's being threatened by pollution, by overfishing, by proposed new activities, and we really need to find a place to come together to bring science to inform management.
This is because the United Nations legal framework leaves out this area, the high seas, correct?
Well, there are laws and policies governing the high seas, but they're largely focused on how we exploit fish, how we manage seabed mining, how we manage shipping. But what they leave out is the fact that the ocean is filled with life and that we need to sustain this life if we're going to have a sustainable planet. So the treaty is trying to bring together and basically influence how we think and approach and manage the vast ocean and all of its biodiversity beyond our national boundaries.
We are talking about piracy, fisheries, genetic resources. What kind of things are we talking about when we talk about protecting the high seas?
Well, we're trying to protect the high seas by, one, building its resilience through marine protected areas. And so the marine protected areas would be places where ideally none of these activities take place, where we're actually better managing, governing, and eliminating harmful activities. That's they become a place to focus marine scientific research to understand how the ocean is changing. At the same time, we need to be building capacity of all nations to better understand ocean change and to manage their own activities. That would help to reduce the amount of piracy. It would sort of build the infrastructure that we need to eliminate illegal fishing activities because we have eyes in the sky and we can utilize computers to sort of identify whose ships these are. And we can create a sense of common purpose, common ownership, and common vision of this vast global commons.
And at what stage are these negotiations on the United Nations right now about the High Seas Treaty?
The negotiations are at a critical final stage. We've had 4 intergovernmental conferences, and we had to reschedule the now 5th and hopefully final meeting for August of this year. There's been a 2-year pause. The negotiations started in 2018, but because of COVID, governments were not able to come together again until 2022, just this March. But we didn't have enough time, and because of COVID restrictions, governments couldn't really get down to tackling some of the still knotty issues, the complicated issues that need to be addressed before we're going to have a truly ambitious treaty. But August is the time that we're focused on now.
August? So you think in August we might have this new treaty?
Yes, we have high-level commitments from the European Union. We have high-level commitments from the United States, from many other countries who are saying this is the time, 2022. We've already waited too long to start restoring ocean health, restoring productivity, and ensuring the ocean is itself resilient. And the longer the clock ticks, the harder it is to build attention. Too many government delegates have actually left the ocean realm and, gone on to different posts in the government. So if we want to keep attention and keep an informed diplomatic basis, we need to bring this treaty to rapid conclusion. And on to the implementation stage. That's where the fun will begin.
But what are the knotty issues right now that are dividing nations in the context of the negotiations?
Well, one of the knotty issues is marine genetic resources. And in many ways, the developing countries were promoting a new treaty under the Law of the Sea Convention already back in the early 2000s to deal with this new industry called biotechnology based on marine genetic resources. And they wanted to get a fair share of the profits that were stemming from this new industry. Developed countries largely say, well, no, it's high seas freedoms, what we discover is ours. And what's interesting is we don't really have a good way to share the many benefits of what the ocean provides. And marine genetic resource is just one small example of how we are developing new technologies, new industries out of that. So what I'm hoping is that, in the past 20 years, science has evolved to learn new ways to use DNA. RNA, environmental DNA, can tell you who's living here, what they're doing. We use it for fisheries assessments. We use it for wildlife trade enforcement. You can identify the type of species it is. But if we're going to utilize marine genetic resources for science, for conservation, for management, we really need to step up the amount of money that goes into implementing the agreement. So my take on it is a large part of the knotty issues are really about fulfilling our prior commitments to capacity building, to knowledge sharing, to technology transfer, to really getting in to say, yes, we're taking this commitment seriously to ocean health. We need to provide what all nations need in order to create a truly healthy ocean that benefits all.
But how do you share the benefits? Because in the deep sea mining, there was also this aim of share all the benefits to the humankind. And is this sharing being effective right now?
Well, in theory, the benefits from seabed mining, the monetary benefits, were supposed to be shared equitably. But what we're seeing in the supposed financial regime that is being put forward is that no, there's actually very little money that will go to developing countries, to states outside the few that are the contracting states or the sponsoring states, and of course the companies that are supporting the sponsoring states. So instead of having a regime that truly lifts all nations, all boats, you would have something that would only benefit a very, very few, and any money that came out would be distributed so widely because they're just saying, oh, we don't want to actually pay society, we want to incentivize deep seabed mining. So it's the wrong way, I would suggest, to approach a new industry. But at the same time, we've also found that deep seabed mining could be inherently destructive. And we really need to step back and say, do we want to be supporting and incentivizing a new industry that could in fact undercut the biodiversity, the biological processes, climate change, carbon sequestration that we all need in order to survive? So we need something that benefits all people, and by sharing the small monetary benefits that could come out of this new industry, it's not an equitable basis to move forward.
So, but what is your opinion on the deep sea mining? Because to me it's not very clear.
Oh, well, deep seabed mining presented a wonderful promise back in 1982 when the Law of the Sea Convention was negotiated. But I think as we've learned more about the value of the deep sea, the biodiversity in the deep sea, and the ecosystem services like carbon sequestration, about food provision, that we really need to value the wider services before we try to go into a new industry that could potentially seriously harm these many values that we also get. So I would say I would join, as IUCN members have done, in saying we really need to call a pause on deep seabed mining and rethink our approach to what we extract from the deep ocean.
And if sharing the biodiversity on the high sea is a problem, how do you think this huge problem might be tackled?
Well, I think sharing the benefits, this is the exciting thing about biodiscovery, is you can create new products. I was speaking with someone who said she's studying processes of photosynthesis that animals utilize in order to get energy. If we could start to understand how marine life functions and then start to apply some of these functions to create new healing salves, new face gear, new ways to create energy, we'd all be much better off. But we do need to find a way to enable countries to go into new industries, ocean industries that are in fact sustainable, but we have to have a test. We have to have limits, and we have to be able to say no when something is inherently destructive. And that's what I worry about with deep seabed mining.
Mm-hmm. And about the new treaty, the new agreement for the high seas, this new treaty is being negotiated in the framework of the United Nations Law of the Sea. So it's not a new treaty separated for the law of the sea of the United Nations, but under this huge umbrella, right?
Yes, so this is the third implementing agreement to the Law of the Sea Convention, and in many ways it was spurred by the need to fulfill some of the broken promises of the Law of the Sea Convention, and this includes the obligation to protect and preserve the marine environment. That is very clear in Article 192, but also about assisting developing countries with environmental assessments. That's how do we actually understand and manage the marine environment. The Law of the Sea Convention talks about creating scientific criteria, rules, and guidelines for how we manage activities for the whole ocean. And we haven't done that yet. The Law of the Sea Convention is now 40 years old. We're celebrating the 40th anniversary this year. It's time to take a serious look at what we have done and what we need to do to fix the broken promises of the Law of the Sea Convention, and also find new ways to adapt it, to enable it to evolve to match the new challenges we have from climate change, from the biodiversity crisis, and how all of our, even ongoing resources or industries are being affected by climate change.
So do you say that the environment is the big gap on the law of the sea?
Yes, we have industries that manage fish and fish stocks, but have forgotten that these fish live in a much wider marine environment that need clean waters, they need pure waters, and they need cold waters for the most part. And we seem to be doing our very best to disrupt their habitat.
You also mentioned the nexus climate, ocean, biodiversity. And I noticed that this is a new trend in the politician speeches. 5 years ago, I never heard any politician talk about this nexus.
Well, that's a very exciting trend, actually, that we understand that none of us have the scientific knowledge or the understanding that we need in order to create rational policies. So we need to have informed decision-making that builds on science, builds on understanding of ocean life, and builds on values, too. And that none of us has the expertise to do this alone. So the nexus is really people, and the people coming together to saying we need to find ways to live sustainably, to allow nature to thrive, and to make sure we leave nobody behind.
But the nexus is happening on the nature, on the planet itself, but was not happening on the speeches, on the politicians, because scientists and politicians were not together looking to the planet, to the ocean, to the climate, and to the biodiversity as one problem that is bounded together.
Well, we have a chance to change that. We have the UN Decade of Ocean Science that is really trying to push science beyond the limits to transform our relationships to the ocean. And I think moving from words to action is a lot about what this meeting is about, and how do we actually come together to say, yes, we commit to sustainability, we commit to protection and restoration, but really committing to work together to find the knowledge base, to resolve our differences, and to come to that common understanding of what it's going to take, and committing the resources in order to do it. And that's what the exciting development is here, is that people are really starting to recognize that it's going to take a huge commitment to up our game to match the challenge of climate change. And as we are trying to accelerate our reaching of these goals, 2020, 2025, we recognize that it's going to take broad-based and wide support and new ways of doing business.
So, what are your hopes for the Lisbon Conference on the oceans?
Well, that we will come away with reinvigorated commitments to ocean sustainability, ocean health, and ocean resilience, and to supporting the many people who live on and off and who enjoy and value the ocean. We can't forget that there is a common value that even us land lovers hold in the marine environment, and this makes us a stakeholder, that we all are stakeholders in the health and vibrancy of the ocean. And if we can convey that to policymakers and get them to realize that they too have a stake, And that stake requires a reciprocal commitment to making the policy decisions that we need to ensure sustainability across the next 50 years. That would be exciting to me.
And finally, what has been the role of the International Union for Conservation of the Nature?
Well, my colleagues are all over the place. We have a wonderful ocean team that's working on everything from marine plastics to blue carbon to ocean health to ocean investment. So I think dealing with ocean issues takes a holistic approach. It takes a team approach to tackle the many issues, from the fundamental science questions, management questions, reducing threats from land, as we're seeing with plastics, and then also dealing with the atmosphere and climate change, and then dealing with the ocean beyond national jurisdiction. So it takes a village, as you would say, to raise a child. It takes a village to create a healthy ocean.
And so you are part of that village.
It's a privilege to be part of that village.
Uma conversa com Kristina Gjerde, jurista da União Internacional para a Conservação da Natureza, conduzida pela editora do Azul, Teresa Firmino. Em cada episódio do nosso podcast, como é habitual, deixo-lhe sugestões para espreitar no site do Azul. A propósito da Conferência dos Oceanos, fomos ouvir escritores que leem o mar. Lídia Jorge, Mário Cláudio, Jaimília Pereira de Almeida e Afonso Cruz aceitaram o desafio do Azul e encontraram-se com o jornalista de vídeo Tiago Lopes para ler junto ao mar. Lídia Jorge, por exemplo, escolheu a praia da Falésia em Bliqueime, no Algarve, para ler um excerto da Ode Marítima de Fernando Pessoa.
No mar, no mar, no mar, no mar, é pôr no mar, ao vento, às vagas, a minha vida, salgar de espuma arremessada pelos ventos, meu paladar das grandes viagens.
Um trabalho para conhecer no site do Azul. Esta semana, na Conferência dos Oceanos, foi também apresentado o mais recente relatório da FAO, a Agência das Nações Unidas para a Alimentação, que nos diz que nunca comemos tantos animais criados em aquacultura. Andréia Azevedo Soares esteve a ler o documento, conhecido como Relatório Sofia, que mostra que este setor em expansão aumentou a produção de alimentos para 178 milhões de toneladas em 2020. A aquacultura é vista pela FAO como uma poderosa solução para combater a fome, mas é necessária uma transformação azul. E agora que se fala tanto de oceano por causa da Conferência das Nações Unidas em Lisboa, recordamos o legado do biólogo Mário Ruivo, oceanógrafo e político do oceano, que morreu em 2017. A editora Teresa Firmino conversou longamente com Maria Eduarda Gonçalves, jurista e viúva de Mário Ruivo, para conhecer a história de um homem à frente do seu tempo, que mostrou a centralidade que o oceano tem no planeta. Para ler em publico.pt/azul. Se gostou de ouvir este episódio, siga o podcast na sua aplicação preferida para não perder o próximo. Se tiver sugestões, envie um e-mail para aline.flor@publico.pt. O podcast do Azul é editado por mim, Aline Flor, e regressa em breve. Até lá!
O público fica no ouvido.